Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser, who's rocking the Marist Red Fox sweatshirt today. Big ups, Red Foxes.
Foxes.
How we doing, Coach?
Great. How are you?
Good. Today's topic, we're going to talk broadly about social media, how it's impacted recruiting, how you can leverage it, and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and kick this one off, Coach, and let's talk a little bit about social media and the world of college baseball recruiting. Have at it.
Sure. Social media has become a huge player in the college baseball landscape. Everyone that we've had on from an interview standpoint, whether or not it's a Division I, II, or III coach, talks about how they use social media in one way, shape, or form when it comes to the recruiting aspect of things, whether it's, finding guys, identifying players, being able to check in on other events that are going on and things you're at. And then also kind of doing character and those types of evaluations through the social media platforms, and I think the other is that a lot of guys touch on and maybe don't expound upon as much, but they also give you an insight through their social media of what goes on in their programs. So kids can get an accurate feel for, the types of stuff that you believe in, what it is that you like to do, what the program looks like, things like that. So you have kind of a little bit of a window into those programs through social media as well. I think the other part, and we can go down a pretty extensive rabbit hole in talking about social media when it comes to this stuff too, is the vast amount of information that is out there on social media for players, for parents, for coaches. There's a lot of information out there, and I think being able to sift through what's good, what's not, what's accurate, what's not, and understand that, a lot of the people who kind of have a platform on social media, it's like, just kind of screaming into an empty room, really, or into a crowded room, I suppose, not really an empty room. You're just screaming into a crowded room what you believe and what you think. And I think sometimes that there's some intention behind what people put out there, but I think a lot of times it can be a little either A, misleading, or B, lead to some misinformation from people who, may or may not have, coached college baseball or, done this for a living to really know what it's like on this side of things. So, there's a lot of really, really good things when it comes to the social media aspect. You can get on there and showcase yourself and reach out to, tons of coaches. You can DM them, they can DM you. They can follow you and get updates on where you're at and your progress, and they can follow, coaches can follow that route. But there's also the other side of it where there's a lot of information out there where, you have to be, mindful of what you're consuming and what it actually, how it pertains to you and whether or not it's, as true as you think that it is, so it's a little bit of a dicey, dichotomy where you have a lot of really good things on there. And then you have some things where it's like, this isn't necessarily the best, or this is a tad bit misleading. But, I think for tonight, we'll at least start on this. We'll start with the positives of, it closes the gap, right? Like there's a lot more access to kids from a college coach standpoint, where you can get on Twitter and it shrinks the country a little bit, where it's literally on your phone or on your computer, where you can see videos and you can see them take live at bats and you can see them throw bullpens and get Rapsodo reports and all those things, or TrackMan, whatever it is. You can get all that stuff at your fingertips and really be able to decide, like, hey, this is a skill set of somebody that I might want to pursue, and then go that route and then get into the character piece and whether or not it's going to be a fit. So there's a lot of positives to it, and I think if we start there and build out, we can get to some of the other stuff too.
Yeah, there's a lot of positives. There's a lot of negatives. I mean, we joke about it all the time, like Twitter's the best and worst place on the planet. But
should be tagline.
Yeah, if you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think social media provides a unique look into programs which I think is incredibly valuable from a recruiting perspective, that you can kind of get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. Now, obviously, what you see on social media is really just the tip of the iceberg, but you get a view of the iceberg. Like, you get to have an idea. You can see how coaches act and interact on Twitter, which you'd be surprised how some coaches, how active they are on social media. In fact, there might be a correlation between how often you tweet and your success level, but we'll leave that up in the air for what to take with what you want with that. But you get a chance to see what these programs do. They have their schedules up. They're showing updates on their field. They're giving you some insight into where they might be. That's become a thing. Coaches are actively saying, "Hey, I'm going to be at this tournament." All right, good. Gives you a reason to reach out to a coach. A little bit more open access from a communication standpoint. I don't think it's done it yet, but I think that direct messaging is slowly creeping into the contact realm, kind of starting to take the place of email a little bit, because coaches are so active on social media that in some ways it can be an effective way. And I think it's starting to trend in that direction, where that's going to become a much more common way for guys to actually reach out to coaches. And from a player's perspective, you have an opportunity to put something out there that represents you athletically and from a character perspective. And I think as a player, you should take advantage of that. It's a way for you to get noticed, understanding how tags work, what type of video, what type of content to put up, I think becomes increasingly important, and how to leverage it. The one thing I would be remiss to say is, if you're a player, I think it's important for you to not do it for the gram. Don't do it for the tweet. Use them as tools to help you get recruited. But as soon as you find yourself deliberately posting content just for the post and for the likes and for the attention, you may be losing sight of what you're really trying to get out of it from a social media perspective, from a recruiting perspective, I should say. If you have your own, Instagram account and you got thousands of followers, like, that's a little bit different. But I think if you're trying to use it from a recruiting perspective, be thoughtful about what you post. Be thoughtful about how you use the tool, and do everything you can to try to use it to your advantage to get yourself some on the map with some coaches.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that go into this, and I think you're right. There are some posts that you read, and it's as a former coach, I'm trying to find the right words to make sure that this comes out the correct way, but it's weird. I think sometimes when you read stuff from kids that are like, let's in the transfer portal, and then you have you're reposting things from your friends that more or less say, like, college coaches would be, I feel bad for the people who pass on this guy. Like, and you've never coached college baseball. Like, I'm glad you're trying to lift your buddy up, but it's that, like, that to me is it is an example of, like, you're just doing this for the attention. It's not necessarily, in it for the recruiting end of what's going on. So I think that, walking that fine line of making sure that what you're putting out there is, accurate from who you are as a player and an individual, so that coaches, who are using Twitter and Instagram to be able to kind of identify some guys, can legitimately be able to look at your skill set, go through your social media, and kind of say, like, okay, this is a guy that I would be interested in at least following up with and seeing where this goes. I think sometimes when you're putting things out there where it does seem to be a little bit more attention seeking from an overall standpoint, that's where it kind of turns into, like, I don't know if I'm really gonna, follow down this road, because at the end of the day, yes, it shrinks this country from a talent standpoint, but at the same time, like, there's Coach Rossi used to say this all the time. It's a big country with a lot of guys who play this game. Like you can go out and find more guys and on Twitter and live that aren't going to be as attention seeking and, are a little bit more humble about what it is that they're doing and will fit into your program likely a little bit more. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind that you do want to use this to your benefit, because it is a huge benefit that, you and I didn't grow up in. There was no Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or anything when you and I were going up and going through this. So, we've said this, I don't necessarily envy these kids, but at the same time, I think that it's, they've grown up in it. You kind of have the, what is attention seeking, what you are using for, straight up recruiting when it comes to the social media, your social media presence and what you're putting out there for people to see, and that to me is the kind of the stark difference of, how you can leverage it the correct way. And then how, it could be, you can get a little bit off the path and not necessarily use it to your benefit when you can.
Yeah, absolutely. The content you put out is huge. And I think if you just remember, if you're a player listening to this or you're a parent of a player, if you can just start with, be thoughtful about what you post, because what you post represents you and your family and the people close to you. So if you go and post something that's offensive, that is dumb, that puts you in a bad light, you have to recognize that is now accessible to the broad public, and it's not going away. Even if you delete that tweet, somebody screenshotted it, whatever. So if you can start there, and then step 2 is shape your content around recruiting and use it as a tool for recruiting, I think you put yourself in a pretty good place to take advantage of the power of social media. That would be my 2 pieces of advice for any player or parent as you go through this. Just understand that it can be a positive for you, but it only takes one stupid tweet to be really negative, and you want to do everything you can. Maybe wait a few minutes before you post. Don't ever post emotionally. I see some people respond to some of these tweets, and you wonder if they wish they could take some of those responses back. But just be thoughtful about what you post, and you usually put yourself in a pretty good spot to use it. So I thought you hit on something that is really important too. What you consume, right? There's a ton of information out there, and not all of it is correct. Not all of it may be beneficial to you as a player or as a parent. So just vet your sources, make sure that you're following people or you're taking advice from people that are reputable. You see some people just tweet some just outrageous stuff about college baseball, and it's, as guys who've done it and guys who have been in it and are still very much in the college baseball world, like it's hard to see how somebody would post that. I mean, I saw somebody post the other day that all on-campus camps are only to fund the volunteer, and that you shouldn't go to them if you're a recruit, and it's just one big money grab. And he said it in fewer words than that, but it's just one of the examples of, just be thoughtful about what you consume and who you're following, and, make sure that you're getting something out of those individuals that you follow.
Yeah. I think the consuming part is one of the biggest things that you need to take into consideration when you get into the social media realm. And, realistically, it's specifically Twitter. You can see, you follow people and you'll see some outrageous things being thrown out there. And I think in some regard, it's designed to create some conflict and you can get your tinfoil hat on for a later episode of social media stuff. But, I don't necessarily know if I subscribe to the fact that a lot of the people who go after each other really dislike each other. But you're right. I think that there's, I've seen tweets that are, completely outrageous and I think the important thing is to ask yourself, like, who's putting this out there? Like, what is the resume of the person that's throwing this out there? If that is a person who, has never coached at the college baseball level and is throwing stuff out there, like, that's their opinion. Like, they've never lived it. They don't know. They don't run a program. They've never been an assistant coach. Like, and I don't know if that person who tweeted that out has or has not. I really don't know. But it's worth asking yourself that question, right? Like, okay, who is this person and what is this? Instead of just blindly following it and being like, well, yeah, no, like, it's what this guy said, so it's got to be true. And that's something that's literally been said for ever. It's been said for as long as people have been running camps. And I think the other is, and you can take it a step further too, is, it's the same as consuming the people who tell you that, hey, he's a really good player. Like, okay, like, who is we've talked to families and I've heard them say, like, well, we've had a handful of dads who have said he's really good. Like, okay, like, what's their resume? And I'm not trying to put anyone down, but like, when you start talking about, you have to be in the top 7% to go play Division 1, 2, or 3 baseball. Like, it's relatively easy to kind of tell that someone is a good baseball player, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can go play at the next level, right? Like, in my opinion, like, that's like asking your plumber for investment advice. Like, what does that mean? Who is this person? I don't know. I don't know what that means, so I think it's the same. To me, it's always kind of been the same thing. Like, you see people throw all these outrageous things out there and it's like, okay, like, what's the motivation? And B, like, what's your expertise in this field for me to be able to really consume what it is that you're putting out there and believe what you have to say. And I think that they're like, because of those types of things, you have a lot of misinformation out there that people start to believe because you don't, they're the loudest voices in a room of 1,000 people screaming. So it's like, well, no, they have a lot of followers, so it's got to be true. And it's the age old thing of like, not everything on the internet is true. So I think that, when you see those types of things on social media, it's legitimately being able to kind of ask yourself, like, okay, like, where is this coming from? And what is the resume of the person who's throwing this out there? Like, again, if you're throwing stuff out there and you've never actually worked in this business, like, you could be a player, but being a player and being a coach are two wildly different experiences, and you have absolutely no idea what goes into being a coach. Any single coach or any single young coach out there who's gotten into coaching, I mean, a bunch of my guys have gotten into coaching. Like, the first thing that they'll tell you is like, this is totally different than anything I ever thought that you did, because it's a totally different experience. So to sit there and just, throw random stuff out there, to me, is just, it's dangerous, and it's not. It leads to a lot more dis and misinformation than there should be out there.
I mean, it takes, you get back to like the trust factor, right? With the evaluation process, which we've talked about a little bit, is having played doesn't qualify you to have, and this will probably piss some people off, but I'll say it. Having played college baseball doesn't qualify you to evaluate college baseball players. No. I mean, there's dudes that we played with who are fantastic players, right? Fantastic players who didn't even really like baseball. They liked playing, but they didn't like anything else about it. You think that I'm taking their opinion on whether a kid's good or not? Yeah, it's just that simple. Like, there's a lot of guys who are good players, but they don't, like, evaluating. It's not like anything. It takes time. It takes experience. It takes failure. It takes guys who mentor you. It takes having information at your fingertips. It takes seeing thousands and thousands of players and thousands of pitches and innings and at bats and workouts before you even become remotely good at it. It's not like some gift that you're born with. Like, yeah, some people have a knack for it. but that knack has been developed over thousands of hours of evaluation, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in many cases, I'm sure. Somebody will probably correct me on my math there, but if you've been coaching for 25 years, every single time you step foot on a field, a college practice, that's an evaluation period. And until you're doing that every day and you're around players at various different levels and you've seen what 100 big leaguers look like when they're 16 years old and you have enough knowledge to know when you're not right? Like, it's an inexact science as it is, but it's an even more inexact science when you've never really done it before. So it's no different with some of the social media stuff that you see people post, is that just be aware of who's posting it. Just because they play baseball or have coached baseball doesn't mean they're a valid voice, right? Like you gotta dig a little bit. Like you gotta question things. There's nothing wrong with questioning things and learning and trying to dig a little bit deeper and trying to better understand things. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't take some of it at face value, because like anything else, there's often quite a bit of nuance to it, right? Like we're talking about the on-campus tweet, the on-campus camper tweet. There's parts of that statement that are not false. There's truth in there. Do volunteers and assistant coaches get paid out of on-campus camps? Yes, they do. Of course they do. But that tweet made it seem like all the money goes there and that's the only reason that they're actually being run, which is patently false. Every single program in this country gets commitments out of their on-campus camps, guaranteed. If you run on-campus camps, you recruit kids out of your camp, period. So that's patently false. The other part of it is too, is that, yeah, some of it is financial. If you have any idea the inner workings of college baseball, like I would say 80% of college baseball coaches could use every penny of money they can get in their wallet because they ain't making a lot. Especially if you're a volunteer or a second assistant, like this idea that college baseball is this cushy lifestyle and that you get to, like, you work your ass off for freaking pennies until you're a head coach, and even in some cases like that, there's guys who are head coaches who don't make a lot of money. Like, for somebody to tweet that kind of stuff, it's just naive. And it's just an example of, just dig a little bit. Be cognizant of what you're reading.
It's not to say that there's not good people on social media that put out a lot of really good stuff.
There's a lot of them that are very good.
Right. It's sifting through it and finding where it is. But, there is some truth in the fact that coaches are going to be able to pay their assistants out of camps. Like that's just the truth. And, to your point, like, I coach college. I made a career out of it. I coached for 16 years at the college baseball level. Like my first 2 years, I was the second assistant recruiting and making $0. It was a straight volley position. I'm 37 years old. I didn't make more than $28,000 coaching college baseball until I became a head coach. Like, you can do the math. I was in my 30s. Like, there's not a lot of people out there that do that. It's the reality. Like the coaching and people like coach, like everyone knows this. Coaches at any level at pretty much every sport are wildly underpaid for the amount of hours that you put in to what it is that you do. But at the same time, like you're right. Like the amount of time it takes for you to figure out how to become a good evaluator it takes years. It's not something that you just, wake up one day and you're like, all right, I'm really good at evaluating. Like, it takes hundreds and thousands of hours of watching games, of recruiting, of evaluating, of watching your team, and I think one thing that gets lost a lot of it too is that, like, when you're recruiting, it's you're trying to project in some instances, 36 months out of where that kid is going to be. Like, you could be recruiting him as a junior in high school. You got a year for him to be a senior. You have another year for him to be a freshman. and then you're hoping that he's going to be good by the time he's a sophomore. Like, you're trying to project 3 years out, and that, like, it's, I think in a world of like, what have you done for me lately? A lot of times it's like, well, he's not good now, or he's not there yet. Like, yeah, very few dudes are really there right now. I think it's been sped up a little bit with the specialization and things nowadays, but like, the evaluation piece, and we're getting a little off track here, but I think from a social media standpoint, like, there's a lot of voices out there, and being able to kind of sift through the ones that are valid and put out really good information, and you can actually tell that it's coming from a place of like, whether or not it's information or not, like, you want to make sure that, to question it when you see stuff like that. It's not just that one tweet specifically. Like, there's hundreds of them every day that I see that I'm like, I can't believe that this is being said, but it is what it is. Like, you can just literally go on there and just type out whatever it is that you want to type and hit send, and wham, there you go. And then, I think there can be some good discourse on there, but in some regards, it's a lot of times of people just digging in their heels and having ego about what's going on. So you want to make sure that you're actually following people that provide value to what it is that you're going through, and can provide context and legitimately try to help you through this process. The other one, and I think that this is a big thing, and I think it's been a little bit more of a movement lately, in recent years, is the tweeting out of or posting on Instagram the offers that you received and things like that. I think that it's my personal feeling is that it's more along the lines of the world that we live in, and you're now recruiting kids that have grown up in this realm. It happens in a lot of other sports. I think the natural progression is that it does happen and will happen in baseball. I think that there's a lot of people that are split about whether or not they like it. But I also, I've said this to you, I've said it to a couple other people. Like, I think it's easy. I think the kids are the low hanging fruit to kind of hammer on this type of stuff. I think that you have a lot of people that will hammer kids on like, well, you shouldn't be tweeting offers out, but then, we'll anonymously tweet about, people pulling offers, and, all this stuff happens, and you won't call anyone else out about it. Like, in this business, like, everyone knows, people won't actually call other coaches out on stuff, but, they'll hammer kids. And I think that it's a misguided attempt, in my personal opinion, to kind of attack 16 to 17 year olds and not, some other grown men when it comes to, some of the things that you might not like, so I don't necessarily care for it, to be completely honest with you. I don't necessarily know what it necessarily means in the context of like, well, I got offered. Like, no one really knows what that offer is. Like, it could be a roster spot, it could be a recruited walk on, it could be money. Like, no one really knows. Like, it is what it is. But I think that there's to think that it's not going to happen in college baseball when it happens in a lot of other sports. I just think that that's a naive kind of mindset to think that like it's not going to continue to happen, because kids are growing up watching it, and you look across the board in other sports. I mean, it's a known fact for years in football that they go and flip recruits. Like I rue the day on Twitter when that starts happening in baseball, and guys are flipped, and the world is going to end. But I don't think that it's far off, in my personal opinion. I just, like I said, I think it's kind of low hanging fruit, and we're now coaching and recruiting kids that have grown up watching all of this and seeing it, and to them it's normal. To people who didn't grow up in this and didn't go through this, like, it's not normal to us, but I think for 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, it's a normal thing to do. But that's also, I think to every individual, whether you like it or not, I do think that it's likely going to continue to happen. So, I do think that, it's something that if it's something that you want to do, I would, my suggestion would be that you have that conversation with the coach that extended you that offer. If it's like, hey, like, do you mind if I put this on social media? If they say no, then you should respect those wishes and not put it on the interwebs. If they say like, hey man, I don't care, like, then if you want to do it, go ahead. But I think that's a fair question to ask a coach if you're a kid who wants to do that type of stuff, to just say like, hey, like, I appreciate it. That's awesome. I'm super fired up. Like, do you mind if I put this out on social media? And kind of go from there. And, I think that's a fair thing. But if they say no, I think you obviously as a kid need to respect the fact that they said no and don't do it. Sorry.
It's definitely an interesting time when it comes to that kind of stuff. I got a couple thoughts on what you said. I think, yeah, I agree with you. I'm not a huge fan of tweeting out an offer that you didn't accept yet. But to your point, this is a different era, and you got to kind of recognize how things are. The piece of advice I would give to any kids who are doing that is ask yourself why you're doing it. Like, what's the value in that tweet? If it's just for you and it's just because you want the world to know that, hey, my talent has been validated by this offer, you might want to rethink that tweet, right? My personal thought is I don't see what the advantage is to it. And like what kind of leverage it provides you as a recruit. Maybe it gets you, I don't know if it gets you an offer. I don't know if it moves the needle with anybody. But to your point, like, coaches having Twitter rants and going off on 16-year-old kids because of something they tweeted on social media. Like, I think you kind of got to take a step back and realize, like, they're kids. They're growing up in a totally different era. This is a totally different time. We didn't live in this time. And to your point, like, I don't envy these kids. No, I think social media makes it way freaking harder for them. I think it makes it way harder for them.
It does. And I don't mean to cut you off. I want to, talk about it.
Please do, Keith.
A quick second. Like, it's, like, you and I we're in our 30s. We didn't grow up with Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Like, Facebook came out when we were in college. Like, we were, we didn't necessarily, like, the internet was more or less in its infancy with us growing up. Like, yeah, we're a little bit further ahead than, some people a little bit older than us, but like, if you're older than us, if you're in your mid 40s and 50s and older, like, you didn't even grow up with the internet. So this world is like completely foreign to you. And I'm not trying to say, like, I'm not doing the whole like boomer thing or whatever that people say nowadays, but like, I think that it's hard for people who, didn't even grow up with the internet from that standpoint to really kind of wrap their heads around these types of things that are going to progressively start to happen. Right. And like, it's the old kind of adapt or die. Like, you can dig your heels in and say, like, I don't like this and blah, like, that's great. But like, it's going to continue to happen, whether you like it or not. It's going to continue to happen. So you can either just complain about it, or you can have like, if you don't like it, when you extend offers to kids, be like, hey, we're extending this offer. We prefer that you do not put this on social media. Simple fix. There you go.
The funny thing,
I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why you can't, like, why we have to go. And again, like, you have to go hit the boards and be like, well, kids nowadays, I hope it doesn't come like football. Like,
well, that's the irony of it. The guys who are tweeting about it have tweeted 10,000 times in their life, and they're the ones mad at a kid for a tweet that they sent. Like, that's the ironic part about it.
You're throwing all this stuff out into this realm, and then you're mad that the kid is doing the same thing. Like, this is an easy, and this is an easy thing. And like, I struggle with social media because I'm not the greatest at it, and I don't really know, but like, I don't understand how you can, like, it bothers me that as a coach and as an educator, that the easiest thing to do is hammer kids, and you really shouldn't be doing that, right? Like, if they're your players and like it's at practice, like, yeah, like, you want to get on your guys, go ahead. But if you're going to start, like, if I'm the kid that was extended the offer and now I see the coach like hitting Twitter complaining about it, like, I'm not going to that school. Like, all right, man, like, I'm out.
Yeah, if
so
you
like, I just don't understand like what's the motivation behind it? Like, why are you tweeting all this stuff out and then complaining that they tweet too much? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, no, that's the part that kills me. And we love it. It's one of our favorite things. It's hypocrisy, but like it kills me that the coaches who are most vocal about things that they don't like about players today, they're the ones leveraging the tools that they're criticizing. Like you're using the same tool that they're using to criticize them about what they use that tool for. Like that's crazy. It's freaking crazy. I hope that it doesn't get to kids tweeting about every offer that they get. I hope it doesn't, because I think my personal thought on it is leverage social media to help yourself get recruited. Save it for the final, the final end tweet where you get to tweet out, "Hey, I'm going here." I think it's cooler sometimes to kind of roll silent, like G's travel silent, like lasagna. Isn't that what Lil Wayne said?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure. I may not have got that completely right, but
well,
I think there's something cool about just going about your business and not having everybody know exactly what you do. But I also, once again, I wasn't 16 when Twitter and Instagram that didn't exist. So maybe I would feel different about it if I was 16. But to be a 45, 50-year-old coach and to sit down, type out, and then click send, like there's a lot of steps there. Like you're intentionally doing that for some reason that's
somebody you offered put it out on Twitter. That's why you did.
Yeah, and you're mad about it now.
And it's not the first time. It's probably the 10th time. And instead of just being like, "Hey, I prefer that you don't do this," but I agree. Like I think that you should leverage social media from the standpoint of like you want to be able to be recruited. I think the double-edged sword in this is that I think some people, and I don't know if it's the kids, I don't know if it's the parents, I don't know, think that if you tweet out that you got an offer from X school, that it's going to put pressure on Y and Z school. And that's just not true. Like you're not going to tweet out offers that are going to move the needle on other programs, because as we've talked about before, like every program is different in what it is that A, they're looking for, and B, what they actually have to offer. Like, so you tweet out this offer at this school, like that's not like with the hopes that it's going to move the needle on a handful of other schools. Like it's not going to do anything. Right. Like like I never in my 16 years of coaching saw a kid, and it's obviously recently that this has really started to happen, but like I never saw a kid be like, "Hey, I got an offer from, University of Rochester," because we had Joe on, and been like, "We recruit a lot of the same kids. I need to move on this kid." Like I did like that didn't do anything for me, because when you're evaluating and what it is, you're trusting your eyes and what it is that you need for your program, so it's not, like it doesn't move the needle really for any other coaches. So like if you're using it from the standpoint of like you're trying to get it to use it from a recruiting standpoint to get other people to make moves, I think it's not going to do anything. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I'm objective enough to see that like these kids have grown up in this era of social media, and this happens in a lot of other sports. Like I know when I was at RPI, when football extended offers, like there's like a whole Canva thing that gets sent out to them of like a graphic that they can post with it. Like they've embraced it in football, and I think that it's when you see that happening in other sports, like, hey, it's kind of only a matter of time that it starts happening in this sport and softball and women's lacrosse and soccer. Like I'm sure it happens in all of them. I don't follow anybody in those sports on Twitter, so I don't know for sure. But it stands to reason that when it happens in, the high level sports, it's going to start to trickle down into some of the other ones. And let's face it, baseball is becoming a high level sport. It's not football and basketball, but it's probably third when it comes to like the following and everything else that's going on. So like there's, it stands to reason that stuff is going to continue to happen. And like I said, if you don't have to like it, but you have to at least understand that this is part of these kids growing up. It's part of their culture. It's part of it's a huge part of their lives. Like you have to be objective enough to realize that and try to figure out either a workaround or a work with that type of stuff, instead of just, tweeting it out that you don't like it and you think it's stupid. Like that doesn't, like, what does that do? Nothing. Like, I don't like it's like, to me, it's kind of the same thing. Like you're tweeting that out in the hopes that a lot of people agree with you and are going to flood your comments and everything with like, yeah, coach, I agree. Like, I think it's stupid, blah, 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 blah. And you get all these likes, you get all these, it's the same thing because it validates what you're thinking. You offering that kid and him putting it out there validates him being a college baseball player. He's going to get the likes. He's going to get the comments. He's going to get all that stuff. You doing the same thing, complaining about it, literally does the same thing it did for that kid.
Yeah.
So like, and the dichotomy in that is like, it's just, I don't understand. Like, and again, I will tell you, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I get it. I understand it. And I think that it's, I think it's just low hanging fruit to hammer kids on it instead of trying to figure out a workaround or a work with. And, and then you see other stuff where, we talked about this on the whole offer thing, and, you'll see people talking about, kids getting dumped or scholarships getting pulled and the transfer portal and all this other stuff, and, everyone will get on there. Oh, call them out. It's the only way this stops. Like no one's ever going to call anyone out. Okay. Like no one's ever going to call anyone out on Twitter. It's not going to happen. So stop tweeting it out. No one's going to call anyone out. It's like, and then there's a firestorm, and you got like there's other people that dip their toes in that have no business dipping their toes in. Like, what are we doing?
Well, then you get you start to get into a situation where you lose sight of the reality of it. Like you talk about, the players getting dumped and kids decommitting. Like that was a part of the process before social media. It was a part of the process before all of this. It's just nobody could talk about it because they didn't have a freaking app on their phone to tweet about it. Like this stuff, it's not new. Like it's not new.
No.
And to be honest with you, like if a kid decommits, like so be it. Like the other thing too is you don't know what the reason was. Like you have no idea what the reason was, and to criticize a kid because he decommitted or criticize a coach because he dumped a kid. Like until you know that full story, shut up. It's really that simple.
But again, I think it's a lot more of a
it's just easy. And you get people to
validate what I think, validate how I feel, and then throw it out there so that everyone else likes it and we can do this.
Yeah.
While on the same hand, probably complaining that, all these people want their feelings validated. Like you're doing the same thing on Twitter. Like this is how you feel. You want it out there so that people will agree with you. Like can't argue with me.
I think this is a good segue into another thing that I think is really important about this, right? Because you're talking about, and you can hear us talking about how tweets and stuff impact us. Like, I don't think it really bothers me on a day-to-day basis, but I'd lie to you if I didn't look at some tweets and be like, what the heck is going on? Or be influenced by something or see something and get anxious about not feeling like I'm doing enough or like whatever it is, right? If you're a high school kid, and this is hard, and this is the part of it that I do not envy these young men and women who have to go through this when they're trying to get recruited, when they're trying to figure out who they are as people. Like being 15 is hard enough. It's even harder when you have to do it in today's world where there's so much social pressure, right? Like it's hard. And I think that's another thing. If you're a college coach and you're the one who's getting on Twitter and you're shitting on kids, like, don't lose sight of the fact it's really hard to be 15 and 16 years old right now. It's really hard. And social media makes it harder. And if you're one of these kids, you got to try to put your blinders on because you need to make sure that you're doing what you can do to put yourself in a situation to be recruitable. And if you get caught up in who's committing, where they're going, like it always it always bothered me a little bit to talk to a kid and he would know where everybody committed. Oh, I saw this guy committed yesterday. And it's like, that's part of the issue is that you build up this anxiety because you're so worried about what everybody else is doing. The recruiting process is not a zero sum game. Just because somebody else commits doesn't mean that you won't commit. And that's a hard thing to wrap your head around. But if you're a high school kid and you can separate yourself from the anxiety and the stress that social media can bring in the recruiting process and you embrace it for the positives, it can be such an awesome tool for you. But if you let it misguide you and if you let it create stress and anxiety, it'll eat you alive and you'll be worried about a lot of things that you don't have control over. And that's the thing I worry about most with kids these days is that they get caught up in that stuff and they lose sight of, hey, I should just have a really good month in the gym. And I shouldn't really worry about that such and such school committed a right-handed pitcher and I really wanted to go there. Like, okay, well, let's focus on the things that you have control of. And it's easier said than done. And I cannot stress that enough. But I implore you, if you are a high school athlete right now, you got to find a way to make sure that the social media isn't having that impact on you, that it's not taking away from your energy, that it's not taking away from your commitment to the things that you can control, which is getting better, which is being a good person, which is being a good student, which is being a good son or being a good daughter. Like control those things and then leverage social media for the positives and do everything you can to try to minimize the negative effects that it can have.
Yeah. And it goes back to who you consume, right? Like, you just have to ask yourself whether or not this is A, worth your time. And, the mute button on Twitter is amazing. Like I mute people. Like I just can't take it sometimes, most times. But I also think it's worth kind of, putting out there that some of the best coaches in this game and specifically in the college game. And we've had some of them on this podcast. Some are coming out recently or soon from a interview standpoint and a release standpoint. And we have a handful of really good, I'll tease the fact that we have a handful of really good coaches coming up that we're interviewing. And when I say really good coaches that are coming out and coming up are like, I'm your football. Some of the best in the country at what it is that they do. And, top 10 teams going to Omaha and Division III World Series and things like that, who have very little to no social media presence. And I think you can go through some of the best coaches in this country and you can try to find them. And there's not a whole hell of a lot that they're throwing out there on Twitter. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. Some of the ones that are the best at what they do, don't get caught up in that type of stuff. And that's not to say that there's not good people out there that you can follow and get a lot of really good information from. But, I think by and large, there's a subset of Twitter that just becomes I'm just looking to validate how I feel and I want to argue with everybody and tell them that I'm the best. And that's not necessarily what you're going to want to, kind of consume because it leads to that anxiety. It leads to, hey, I like these kids all got offers and I haven't. Like, yeah, man, like happens differently in baseball. It'll be fine. Like if you're good enough, keep working hard and you'll more than likely find a spot. If you have the skill set to be recruitable. I've said this before. I'm not really I don't believe that if you want it bad enough, you can play. You have to have the skill set to be able to play at the college level to be able to do it. But if you do and you work hard and you to your point, put your blinkers on. It's a horse racing reference. You can and you get after it in the gym and you become a really good player. You're going to be able to find yourself a spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the good summation of this, and we went on a couple tangents there, but that's always the fun part of getting on the old pod with you, Coach, is that Get to have some
I feel
good
I feel strongly about this stuff. Like,
yeah, me too.
I don't like. I don't take it lightly. Like I really do. It bothers me how some people act, and I shouldn't say act. I don't know if that's how they act in their real life, but it bothers me what people put out and more or less go after 16, 17-year-old kids. Like,
well, it's a classic case
for something that in their mind is completely normal, right? Like if like that's what's actually going on in their world, like it's normal to them. And then to have a bunch of older men who are coaches and educators hammer them for doing something that, you know, they might not understand or they don't like that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, maybe try to figure it out. Maybe try figuring out why it's happening and what you might be able to do to, you know, mitigate that on your end with the kids that it is that you're recruiting. Because it's not going to be with everybody. It's going to continue to happen. You can mitigate it on your end with the kids that you're recruiting, but instead of actually trying to figure those things out, we just hit the boards and complain, because that's a lot easier to do than actually trying to figure out what's going on. Like, it is. Like, I forget who. I read something and I forget who it was, but they talked about how they used to get angry at people, and then it was more so they didn't understand where that person was coming from. Like, I think there's a lot of truth in that. Like, and I think you see that difference with generations, right? Like, everyone's had these issues, but like, you know, the social media thing, I think, is a big thing in sports, and it's so different. Like, we didn't grow up with it. If you're older than us, you didn't grow up with it. You might not even have grown up with the internet. Like, these kids are like, it's in their class. Like, these kids know how to operate tablets by the time they're 4 or 5. Like, whether you're a parent or not, like, wherever your stance is on that, it doesn't matter. But like, these kids know how to do it. Like, they've grown up with that. Like, the iPhone didn't come out until we were in college. These kids are growing up with iPhones. Like, it's not like, it's a totally different experience. And to just kind of, you know, shit on them because you don't like the fact that like they've done some stuff like in that realm, like, either A, try to figure it out, or B, do something on your end to mitigate that instead of just hammering the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it's a classic case of like, just because you can say something doesn't mean that you need to say it. Like,
right.
You don't have to tweet that out. You can feel that and not tweet it. Like, the world's not any better or worse because you tweeted that. Like, it just, yeah, the energy that's wasted on something like that, like, when you can, if it's that big of a concern, I can promise you your tweet ain't fixing it. You're going to need to do something else. If you really think it's that big of an issue, where you're a grown man and you take the time to call out teenagers on a behavior that's fairly common across a lot of high school sports, if it means that much to you, I can promise you that your tweet isn't what's going to be the difference maker in the change.
No. And it's like, I get it. Like, there's a lot of people that feel this way. Like, it's not one tweet. I've seen multiple tweets like this, you know, but like I said, I just think that it's, you know, it's not just the offer stuff. It's, you know, it's a lot of stuff. I just think that it's a weird thing to me that you have, you know, people who pride themselves on being coaches and educators that then complain in a widely huge forum that they don't like what these kids that they're looking to coach and educate are doing. Like, okay, then don't recruit. Like, either figure out a way where you can actually work with it, or like, go get another job. Like, you don't have to be a college baseball coach if you don't like it that much. If you don't like it that much that you need to tell the world everything, like, just go get another job. It's fine. Like, I mean, it's, no one's making you do this.
I agree. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think I got my point across tonight.
I'll say this, and we said it at the top, but like, social media, Twitter, Instagram, like, they're the best place and the worst place all at the same time. Like, if you're, and this is personal advice to me and like myself, I need to be better at this, but like, be thoughtful about what you ingest, right? Vet the people that you do value, right? If you're following people for hitting advice or throwing advice or whatever it is, just do a good job of vetting those individuals, and then also question things, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Use it in a way that can be beneficial, and try not to get sucked into the bad side of it. Because it, like I said, it's a great place and it's the worst place all at the same time. And try to stay in the realm of the good and leverage it to help you get recruited, and leverage it to learn, and leverage it to connect yourself with other people that might be able to help you in your recruiting process. There's a ton of benefits to it. To your point, Keith, like, it ain't going away. It's going to evolve, because I think everything we have technologically does evolve. Like, it's just the nature of it. But it's here. It's not going away. You might as well learn how to use it effectively and help yourself get recruited, help yourself gather information, become more educated, and use it in a way that's going to benefit you from a recruiting perspective. And I'd say you probably can get a lot out of it.
Yes, I agree. I agree completely.
Love it.
Monitor who you're following. Question.
I love when you agree with me.
Question what it is that you're consuming. And, but I think that's fair of anything, like whether or not it's baseball or not, like question what it is that you're, being told. And, I'm not trying to go, I'm just saying, like, from a coaching standpoint, like, yeah, sometimes you're just gonna have to blindly follow, but like if someone's trying to make a bunch of wild adjustments to your swing, like if you don't understand, ask the question. You should tell my guys all the time, like, don't just yes me, like ask questions if you don't understand, because then it's going to lead to more issues. Just ask questions. Same thing.
Well,
you see something,
there's a way to ask.
Does this make sense? Is this real? Does all camp money only go to the volunteer? Man, I shouldn't go to any camp ever. What about the camps that aren't on campus? What does that money go to? Oh, a guy who has nothing to do with baseball. God. All right, get me off of this. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole tonight.
It's that damn Sasquatch. Why would he eat 30-bag lunches?
Oh, God.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. Had a great time once again with my man, Coach Glass. Check out emdbaseball.com to learn more about what we do to help families. Newly launched online learning academy. Take a look. Quite a bit of information in there, 10 modules you can learn from. And if you want to follow us on social media, EMD Baseball on both Twitter and Instagram. Don't forget to hit the like button and the follow button, and tune in next week. Thanks, everybody.